Hey everybody, this is Tony here with Every Piece Atelier, and we're going to talk about the Pixie today. So, before we get into it, there are pieces of the 5 pillars that we need to discuss. The density, strand, length, wave pattern, and growth pattern comments. So the density for this haircut that's ideal could really be any density. Sparse, normal, thick, any hair type will accommodate this specific haircut. Wave pattern, generally, any wave pattern from curly, wavy, straight, and textured hair can accommodate a pixie haircut, although stick straight hair can be a bit challenging with this haircut, just because the way the haircut sits on the head without any type of movement or body within the hair, it can be a little bit challenging for it to look full. The strand, the most ideal strand for this, again, any strand, fine, medium, coarse, but the length is absolutely important, has to be done in what we consider a pixie length, so this is a short haircut, no weight line above the shoulders. And then as far as the growth pattern goes, it's really important to look at the way your client's hair grows with this particular haircut, because the shorter this haircut is, the more those growth patterns are going to stand out. The direction of the hair is going to come into play, as well as the way the hair grows out of the head, meaning sticking straight out of the head, moving down, or in different directions based upon cowlicks in the hair. Let's talk about how a pixie is going to be defined. We define a pixie as an overall hairstyle with lengths that are shorter than shoulder length, and then without any significant weight line. So when we look at the haircut, there's no area that's really built up with a significant amount of weight within that. There are also 2 different ways that we can look at how this haircut blends together. The haircut pixie that we cut today is a very visual blend, but not a very technical blend. So there are parts of the haircut that you can create as far as undercutting or full blend, meaning that the hair technically sits together. As you look through it and cross-check it, it all sits together. And then there are parts of the haircut that do not sit together at all technically, but as you look at them, they sit well together visually. We'll be talking about a disconnected fringe area, some undercutting on the sides, as well as some undercutting in the crown area. And so when we talk about undercutting, what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that there's areas of the hair that are shorter that sit under or beneath other sections of the hair, with areas of the hair that are longer that then sit over top of those areas that are shorter. Sometimes they're exposed, sometimes they're not, based upon what we're doing. The undercutting can be utilized for a number of reasons. 1, just to absolutely eliminate weight and volume, or 2, to create an area of the hair that has a visual texture in it without actually creating texture in it with the texturizing shears. So this compacts the volume. As you can see on the sides of this haircut, they sit close, but we still have an illusion of length. Whereas if you did this haircut with no undercutting, the volume would be increased on the sides and it might look a little bit full or poofy, too poofy on the sides. So the other thing we do with this haircut is perimeter detailing. So the perimeter is considered any area of the hair that outlines the haircut. So across the fringe or bang, along the side, along the hairline in the back. And what we've done here is left enough length to create some detailing so you can create a soft edge. And just it changes the vibe of the haircut from being something that's more structured and geometric to something that's softer and a little bit more flowing. Finger angle terminology is going to come into play quite a bit with this haircut because we are creating a short shape on a round head form. It is our responsibility as hairdressers to understand how that shape is going to show the head form off. Is it going to be flat? Is it going to be square? Is it going to be round? Where is the volume placed? Where is it taken away? And that all has to do with the way we hold our fingers. So when we talk about holding our finger angle in, meaning our fingers angle in toward the head, this creates a sense of less length toward the head and more length toward the bottom of the head. So the top part of the head decreases in length, and the bottom part of the head or perimeter part of the hair increases in length. It also creates a triangular shape somewhat moving out. If we work with the hair finger angle away from the head, so tipping our fingers away from the head, we're now building volume toward the top of the head or building length toward the top of the head and taking length away toward the perimeter of the haircut to create a sense of roundness and fullness toward the top. So we can either go finger angle in toward the head or finger angle out or away from the head. We're also going to be using different considerations on our panels that we take. Maybe vertical, meaning straight up and down, parallel to the head to decrease weight and width. Or we might be using diagonal sections, either diagonal forward or diagonal backward to create a sense of roundness or curvature within the hair and following the head shape. Or we might be using a horizontal section or for our panels, meaning that this is going to be parallel to the head horizontally, building weight and creating more volume as we move toward the top of the head. So depending upon what shape you're creating, where you want to place your volume, either slim, wide, round, you'll be taking different types of panels. So the Pixie has a few more steps than the rest of our haircuts because we're working with different sections and panels and different planes of the head. It's going to be important that we understand how all this is working together. And so the first thing that we're going to do is section the hair out into the planes of the head. We're going to section the top, the crown, the parietal, the sides, and the nape. And specifically in the sides, we're going to be working with about a third of the section at the bottom of that side to create an undercut. And you can see on the head form here, I've blocked this area out. This is the part that's going to be cut quite short. And we've cut that short enough so that it sits maybe toward the middle of the ear and then very close to the head, just maybe 1 finger length long, taking all the volume and all the length away from that section so that the haircut itself sits closer to the head. The second thing we're going to be doing in the haircut is then cutting the parietal of the hair. So the back area of the parietal, we're working right here. You can see these sections are taken out vertically from the head. Finger angle is parallel to the head, straight up and down, vertical. And we're moving around the parietal section with no over direction. So we're cutting straight out from the head, standing right in front of our sections, not moving one direction or the other, but right straight from the head. After we cut that desired length, we're moving on to the sides. And on the sides, we want to make sure the hair above the undercut section is long enough to cover the undercut section. So do some measuring here before you decide what length you want your haircut. As you can see on this haircut, the undercut section is here, quite short. Then we have the side section that sits on top of that, and then some hair from the top that again sits on top of that. So we have 2 undercuts that are created here to give us this texture from the top, reduction of width from the bottom. And you can't do that with just texturing. You actually have to cut that hair away so that the hair on top of it sits over top of the undercut. Once that section is cut, we'll work into the nape. And so we'll use the guideline length from the parietal section to start our top of our guideline length in our nape. And to do that, we can either choose vertical sections, so straight up and down from the head, or we can do finger angle in or finger angle out. And on this particular mannequin head, we chose to stay just straight vertical in this panel, which left some length toward the edges so that we could detail for a little bit more softness. The vertical finger angle created some length toward the bottom perimeter length of the nape because the nape naturally has a concave shape to it. So it will end up with more length if you keep your fingers perfectly vertical in that area. Once we cut that, we moved on to the crown, holding the crown section here up at 180 degrees with a horizontal finger angle parallel to the head and parallel to the ground. So what happens is you have some areas that are cut with extended length that fall over top of your parietal section to create that sense of texture and a little bit more illusion of length within the haircut, even though it's still a short haircut. So this crown area, again here, is cut to fall on top of the parietal. And then as we move to the front of the haircut, we section a triangle from the high point of the head to the corners of each eye. So we can see in this diagram here, this triangle section and this triangle section. Now there's some arrows that are drawn here because in this section, we're taking panels that are parallel to the top of the top sections here and over directing them over to this section. So this whole entire section gets directed one way and then it gets directed back in the other direction. So what happens is you have this flow of length that comes into the front to a bit of a point. It leaves you some working area to then detail your fringe, cut a different fringe, or leave the length altogether if you want to style it with a little bit more length in the front. And that's how we have this feeling of length here in the front. There's 2 more sections that we haven't talked about, and those are on the top here. These sections were cut using a guide from the crown. This crown was cut pivotally so that you move around the high point of the head and continued that into the front section, stopping at that triangle. That's how we got a guide for the front triangle. And then when I got to the front, I decided I wanted to take the point off of this particular haircut, so it no longer came to a point in the front. I rounded it out and created some texture. When you cut this haircut in rough form and just in shape, it needs detailing. And it's something to be considered with short haircuts in general, because you have the opportunity here to soften, to harden, to adjust, and to take weight away or to leave weight. But most of the time this is best done when the hair is dry so we can see where it sits. So I don't do any detailing with this haircut until it's completely dry and I can determine where exactly I want to remove length or keep length. When you undercut the hair, you have hair that falls on top, and it's imperative to understand if we want to keep all of it or take some of it away. And that's best done after you're dried and styled the hair. So this is the result from the Pixie. You can see multi-layers of undercutting there. There is built-in texture because of the way the top was left a little bit longer. Concaveness in the nape, it shows the roundness of the head. We left hair on the perimeter to create softness and did some texture and detailing around the front. This point here helps to balance this point in the front. And if you notice, that's all disconnected from what's happening underneath of it. So I encourage you not to cross-check this haircut, to look at it visually, dry it, and then do your detailing when you're done. That's the Pixie. So let's head on to the hands-on portion for the Pixie cut. So welcome to the Pixie. Before we get into the actual haircut itself, I'd like to just address the 5 pillars of a haircut, make sure that we all understand who the Pixie's for and what type of hair we want to be working with. As far as density goes with the Pixie, this can be used on sparse, normal, or thick density. So any density can really be used when it comes to working with the Pixie. Wave patterns, again, any haircut can be done, any hair type can be done and used for the Pixie, except that ideally you would like to have some sort of texture in the hair, either curly, wavy, straight. And when we talk about stick straight hair again too, it does make it very difficult for this particular shape to really show itself off with stick straight hair. As far as the strand goes, fine, medium, or coarse hair is completely fine. Lengthwise though, there is a restriction here, and we take this into what we call the Pixie length, because it has to be short, weight line, and otherwise we don't get the general feeling of what a Pixie actually is. And so any types of growth patterns that are in the hair as well should be addressed and looked at with your client. If there's a strong movement of hair anywhere on the head, you want to make sure that you know where that is and can address that to make sure that this haircut is the right one for your client. Okay, let's get into the Pixie. The first thing we're going to do before we start this haircut is section the planes of the head so we know exactly where we're going. There is some disconnection that we'll be working with, and we want to make sure when we're working in that section or that plane. So I'm going to create a center part down the back of the head. Let's comb this hair out of the way and then continue that part into the front. I'll take another section using my comb as a guide. I can find that high point of the head and take a section on the side from the high point to just behind the ear. And we're going to mimic that on the other side of the head. Now, I'm going to section the top and front of the head and put that in one clip. So using the recession area of the head as a guide, I'm going to take a straight horizontal section from the front to the back and then mirror the same on the other side of the head using the recession as a guide. Clean that up. I also want to double check that my parting is the same. Generally in the salon we would have a mirror to do this, but since we don't, I need to take a peek. And I'm a little bit lower on this side. I'm just going to clean that up, and now we're even. So I'm going to take all of the hair on the top and front, comb that together, and clip it. Now let's section out the crown. So I have points on either side of the head where I've sectioned out the top and the sides. I'm going to take my comb and connect each to the center with a horizontal parting, the same thing on the other side, and then combine those two sections to clip them up. Now I'm going to section the parietal area in the back of the head, and with my center part, I'm going to connect the top of the occipital bone to the top of the ear with a horizontal section, clean this up a bit, and then we'll create the same section on the opposite side with the horizontal parting. And the first area that we're going to work with is on the sides of the head. So this haircut, we'll be using an undercut section just above the ear. About 1/3 of the whole side section itself will be cut short and invisible to help the haircut collapse on the side and give it a little bit more of a slim appeal. And I'll do the same on the other side. Again, about 1/3 of that side section. Now, depending upon your hair texture and density will determine the size of that section. I want to double check to make sure we're starting at the same points. It looks like it's a little bit higher on this side. So I'm going to reduce the size of that section to make sure we're even. Now we're even on both sides. So I'm going to cut this section slightly shorter so that the section above it hangs over top. One thing to be very clear about and very aware of is the way the hair growth moves on the side. If you're working with a client that the hair sticks out of the head, you need to leave enough weight here so that it sits down, or cut it short enough so that it's not visible at all. The shape that we're going to work with today, I'm going to cut this so it's long enough for it to sit down and have the rest of the hair hang on top of it. So I'm going to work with cutting this section just about to 2/3 down the ear. If you're cutting very short, you can do shear over comb. I'm cutting short enough that I can use my fingers as a guide here, so lifting up. And I'm going to comb this section straight up and cut that section off. As you can see, it looks quite pokey, if you will, at the moment. It doesn't matter because we're not going to see that part of the hair anyway. And we'll do the same thing on this side. I comb the hair straight up and cut that section right off. I want to look and make sure that we're sitting at the same spot. And from what I can see, there's a slight amount of hair on this side that needs to be taken off. And more adjustments can be made later as we continue the haircut. So I'm going to let the side section down now. And we're going to start this haircut in the parietal. So I'm going to take my clip and position it right in the top of the nape. And the same thing on the other side. So this nape panel is protected from our haircut right now. We'll be cutting that afterwards. We want to make sure it's out of the way. I'm also going to take my side sections down and take the clips out completely. So now I'm going to determine the length of the interior part of the haircut. And the first section I'm going to take is right in the center of the parietal panel. And we're going to comb this section out at 90 degrees vertically from the head. And I want to gauge where this is going to fall. So there's two things I'm going to be looking at here. First, I want to make sure my elevation is on at 90 degrees from the head. Second, I'm going to be looking at my finger angle. Am I going to pick an outward finger angle or an inward finger angle? I would like to choose an outward angle and create some volume on top. My first section is going to be dependent lengthwise on where I need the hair on the sides to fall to cover the undercut that I did. So when I look at the hair on the sides, it needs to be able to fall over top of that undercut. So I know I need my length to be approximately this long. I'm not going to go into a bunch of inches here. We can all gauge with our eyes on what this needs to be. So if you need a reference point, you can use your comb to bring back here to gauge your length. I have a good idea of what this is visually. I'm comfortable with taking this section in the back and creating my first cut. Next section, parallel to the first, body is going to shift a little bit as we don't want to create any over direction. If we continue to pull our section into the previous, the haircut will gradually get longer toward the front. That's not what we're doing with this particular haircut, just so we understand that. So I'm going to comb my previous section into the section I'm cutting next, find my guide, position my finger angle, and cut. And this is going to continue all the way around to the side. Really want to make sure I'm aware of my body position here. So if I'm not standing behind my section or in front of my section, it will shift where I'm holding the hair unintentionally and creating over direction. So I'm right in front of my section, find my guide, my finger angle. As you're cutting, if you want to check to make sure that you're on target, you can take a horizontal section, comb it out, see if your lengths are changing. If they're not, you should have a nice curved line that's following the head shape. Taking my previous section, combing it into my current section, finding my guide, finding my finger angle, and cutting. I do like to take that horizontal section and check every now and then just to make sure I'm on target. And my final section. You can check to see if you have a nice round bevel in your haircut by combing it and blousing it a bit. I also want to check to see if my section that I've cut is on target. I don't have any shifts in length or movement. I don't. I'm good. So I'm going to go back to the center of the back parietal panel, take that center section as my guide, and then begin to move in the opposite direction. I do find that ping-ponging or working back and forth from side to side is good to keep your length balanced. It allows you to check as you're working to make sure that you're on target. So this time I'm going to comb my section I just cut from the center into my new section. And notice that my hand is positioned slightly different now. I have my thumb on the top. I always know that I'm going in the right direction when my thumb is pointing toward the front of the head. So because I switch sides, I need to switch direction with my hands. And now I will cut the second section. All right, next section, part of my previous into my current. And I'm finding that this section feels a little bit too large to hold in one, so I broke it into two. If you're going to do that, that's fine. However, we do need to make sure that we maintain our elevation and finger angle, so you'll need to reposition as you do that. I'm going to take a peek, see if I'm on target, and I am. We'll keep moving. I'm going to work right to the back of the ear. This side, I do have a tendency to decrease my elevation just because of my elbow, so I want to make sure that my shoulder is held up and my elbow is held up as I'm moving forward. Okay, looks like I have one more section just to get behind the ear here, and we're going to take that now and go ahead and cut. Okay, let's move into the side. Before I do, I want to look at the edges of my parietal sections to make sure that they are in fact the same length. And the best way that I can let you know to do that is to really look from the top of the head, so we can pull these sections out and gauge if we're at the same length, and I am. So we'll move forward and bring her back up, and we'll move on to the side. Now, based on my client's head shape, I'm going to decide to either use a horizontal section, a vertical section, or a diagonal section. My model today has a perfect head shape, so I'm able to do whatever I decide to do. And I'd like to take diagonal sections, make this fluid, sit next to the head, very round, and it will sit nicely with this haircut. So I'm going to take a piece of my section from the parietal, and then I'm going to take a diagonal section moving forward from my side. Grab my clip, move the hair out of the way that I'm not working with, and take my section. My finger angle is going to be parallel to the head. I can see that the hair that I'm cutting is going to fall on top of the undercut that I created. So I'm going to stand directly in front of my section, comb this out, use my back piece of hair a guide, and really need to make sure that my fingers are parallel to my section. Any movement out is going to create length. Any movement in is going to take away length at the bottom. We don't want that. We want this to be very symmetrical at the moment. So we'll cut my first section diagonally and let that swing. And you can see there's a little long hair there. Let's catch that. I do need to go back to the way I cut this in the first place. So let's go ahead and take that section. And you can see that the side section is now hanging over top of the undercut. The undercut will help this sit close to the head. Another diagonal section, moving forward. I'm going to take my previous section, stand in front of the section I'm cutting, use it as a guide, make sure my fingers are parallel to my section, and then cut. And we can see now that sits right over top. I continue right into the front. I do need to move this head though, so I'm in my section. Very easy to create length mistakes or additional length you don't want based upon where your body's standing and where your fingers are positioned. So do really keep in mind to double check those. And even though this section seems small because of where it's at, it does have a bit of width. So taking that in half is going to help me stay on track. Parallel to my section, following my guide, my last section. And you can see because of the shape of the hairline and the shape of the perimeter, you get a bit of a point. All right, onto the other side. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. We're gonna take this first section as a diagonal forward, moving the rest of the hair out of the way. Again, be aware of your body position. Too far in front, you're gonna bring the hair too far forward. Too far in back, you could over direct back. So do stay in front of your section when you cut this. I'm gonna use the top of my parietal section as my guide, and we'll cut. This long hair is stemming from my nape, so I'm just gonna put it back in that clip so it doesn't get in my way. And this is gonna continue right on to the front. It's very easy to pull your fingers back toward you at this point, which will create length in the front, which we don't want. So do maintain that parallel finger position to your section. My length is falling just where I want it to cover up that undercut, and I have back to that last section in the front. It's a little bit too thick. I'm gonna break it down in two. Then in front of my section, and we should be seeing somewhat of a point happening, which we are. And then also as we move up the hairline in the front, we'll see some shortness as we get to the front, which we do. Okay, let's take a look from the front. And I can see that there's a small point right here that's a little bit longer than the other side. Part of this is the spring from the hair, but I do want to address that now before I get too far, because it will be hard to correct that. So I need to take this section exactly the way that I cut it first. And as I comb out, I can see that there's a little point of length right here. My finger angle position may have shifted a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that off and see if that takes care of our length. And in fact, it did. So it's just really important to go back to the way you cut the section, you cut that panel previously. Do it the same way or the hair will move differently. Now I'm going to work in the nape. So the guide for this plane is going to come from the parietal. I'm going to take my section right down the center. I have two options here. I can either use a finger out movement, which will create shortness around the perimeter and more volume toward the top, or I can use a finger angle moving in, which will create some length at the perimeter where we can do some fringe work afterwards and make it a little bit softer. So I think what I'm going to do here is just hold it straight, because the nape naturally wants to create a concave movement within the head. And so it's going to automatically add a little bit of length if I keep my fingers in a straight vertical position. So I'm going to do that. Separate that hair, take that first section here, and I can see my guide from the parietal. I'm going to go ahead and just cut that off, which will leave it a little bit square. We'll have to go back in and detail that hair afterwards, and that's fine. My second section is going to pivot from the center of the top of the nape. So I'm going to create a slight diagonal section that's going to pivot. Still using my guide from my previous section and cutting straight down. This section is becoming a little bit large, so I'm going to break it down. I'm continuing my pivot, my guide from the parietal, continuing to pivot, using that previous section as a guide, and finally one more section. So you can see that the line follows the hairline. There's a bit of round, some concave, and then we have some hair to work with afterwards for detailing. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I feel like my head's the mannequin head's getting a little bit dry. I want to keep good dampness in the hair, easier to work with the hair, a little bit cleaner to section. I can comb this hair out of the way. Take that first section again and pivot. Remember, the center of the nape is where we established that guide. If you find that the hair you're not working with becomes challenging, just put a clip in it. Much easier to have it out of the way. I want to make sure that I am creating a section that is pivoting from that center. So I'm going to resection, create that panel so that it's actually pivoting, and cut. And just like that front panel next to the hairline that was small but wide, this is also happening here at the corner. So I'm going to break that into two and our final section. So same thing will happen on this side. Our hairline will dictate our line, and we will have a little bit of length here toward the bottom of the nape plane to detail afterwards. So let's move on. We're going to work with the crown next. So when we cut this section, I'm going to take a center panel and bring it straight up. So how do I know how much length I want to cut here? Well, when I comb my section straight up, I can see how much of this last section is going to hang over top. So how much of that do I want? Just enough to add to that bevel that's already there. And that takes me to about right here. This mannequin head has a lot of different lengths happening, so to make it easier for myself, I'm just going to cut that off. Find that length again, holding my whole section straight up, and for now I can see this is going to fall right over top into that bevel. Any disconnection that we see happening here can be detailed after it's dry. Now I'm going to pivot out from this first section I took, pivot out first to the left, and then pivot to the right. So these are semi-triangular sections, or semi-triangular panels that I'm combing straight up and following my guide. So you can see that disconnection and overhang curves right into the bevel below it. Next panel, I am pushing the hair into the section I'm cutting. If I comb it toward me or comb it toward the section, I will end up over directing it back and extending length in the front, and I don't want that to happen. So we're going to comb forward, we're going to elevate, and then we're going to cut. And then we have one more panel to cut before we get to the other side. Again, lots of extra length, don't need that. Straight up, watch my finger position, make sure it's parallel to the head, and then double check. Great. And yes, there's a few extra hairs here. They blend nicely to the bevel. We can detail that later. I think it's a good reminder just in general that when we do dry the hair afterwards, it gives us an opportunity to make adjustments. Texture changes, bounce changes, all kinds of things change when the hair is dry. So it's a good practice to leave things sometimes and then use them afterwards to create. So let's take another section. This time I am combing to myself because I want to bring the hair into the section and not over direct back. Straight up, pivoting with our panels, combing that hair straight up, watching my finger position and finger angle. And then we have one more at the side, straight up, and just going to double check. Make sure there's no lane corner. Important thing about the Pixie is you are showing the head form and the head shape off. So do take a look in the mirror now and then to see, does the head shape look okay? Is it squared or rounded based upon what you're doing? Okay, top section. I am going to create a triangular section in the front from the high point of the head here all the way to the corner of the eye. And we're just going to move that other hair away. And I'm going to section identically on the other side. This is going to be our fringe area. Let's make sure that we're even so that this section is landing in the same place on both sides. A good way to do that, just twist it together, tighten up that section or that panel, and then clip it. So this is the area that we're working with. And I'll just clip it that way. Okay, before we get into that triangular section, we're going to now work on these two areas on top. They're two triangles, and I'm going to take pivotal sections starting from the top, moving forward. So first panel, and I'm going to do this exactly in the way that I did the crown. We're going to lift it all the way up to 180 degrees or straight up from the head and then pivot out and stopping at that front triangular panel. Combing the hair into the section. In the salon, I would be absolutely cutting this hair off. That extra length because it's more in the way than anything else. So it's no problem to do that. And you'll see that this will also hang on top of that side section. So now we have two undercut sections that are working separately technically, but together visually. Previous section is combed into my current section. I'm using that as my guide. I'm keeping my fingers straight up, combing the hair straight up, and then combing that down. And you see all that hair is falling kind of at that same spot. So it gives the illusion of having some length within the pixie haircut, but also short areas so that it doesn't create too much volume or width at the sides. Okay, I'm going to turn her around and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Starting at that juncture where the crown meets the top, we'll take that first section and comb it straight up, watching my finger position to make sure it is horizontal. Another pivotal section from that high point, combing the hair straight up. I used a piece of my previous section as my guide, and I think we'll do two more sections, two small sections. And the final section. Comb the hair straight up, fingers parallel to the section, and then let's check and see if there's any long hairs. Yep, there's one. And so again, we see we have this length that covers in the front and sits right over top of everything else. Okay, last section. Do, again, take a look and see as we're moving, do I have any extra length? It looks like everything is a little bit of a corner here. So what this means is that I need to go back in and take that same section and comb it up again. It's likely that my fingers dropped a bit. Let's double check. A little bit of extra length there. Let's see if that helped. Yeah, great. Okay, triangle section in the front. This is where we can establish our bang length or movement in the bang if we want to. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take all the hair and over direct it to the section that is right behind it on the top on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So everything's going to come over, and then it's going to go over the other way. So it will connect, but it will create some length in the front so that we have some hair to detail with in the bang area on the front. This section too is quite long, much longer than I need. So I'm going to take some hair off just so that it makes it easier for me to work with. And I'll take my first section here, side of the triangle in the front, parallel to the section next to it. And now I'm going to stand behind my section and comb the section that I'm cutting into the guide behind it. So I want to make sure I am over directing the hair back toward me in that panel and cutting. So we should see some length become extended now toward the front, which we do. Combing all of that hair back to that same stationary guide. And at some point, you may run out of hair. Not quite there yet. A section toward me, a couple hairs, and you see this extended amount of length that comes in toward the front. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So this is my guide, and this is my first section I will be combing into my guide. I need to be standing in front of it, so I have to turn the mannequin head toward me so I can be in the right position, and I can comb that hair up. And what we'll see happen here is that we just have a couple areas that are going to be long. So we'll turn that off. Take another diagonal section parallel to the guide, comb it up, over direct it back into that section. We're just seeing a slight bit of hair in the front. Because you cut so much on the other side, it's likely there won't be much to cut here. We're going to comb the rest of it over, find that guide, and comb it to check. And there's a couple hairs. Okay, so now we have this nice short shape with this extended front that we can, if you want to leave it, you could leave it. You can create any type of look with short and long there. I'm going to cut a little bit of a fringe here, just some texture in the front, so it's not quite so heavy. So I'm going to take this horizontal section across the front, and I can see that this really wants to spring. So I'm going to be very careful on the amount of tension that I use when I cut this. I'm going to take a center section, and what I see happening is that because we over directed to either side, what we have here is a point. I'm going to take that point off. I'll stand square in the front and just point cut that. That was all that it was. So that's the basic design of the Pixie. No detail, nothing else done to it. It's flexible, you can go to either side. Because of the undercut, you can see this length is here, but it still sits close to the head, and the rest of it can be detailed. So before we finish this, we need to dry it. As I mentioned, it's important to dry the hair to see what it's going to do when it's dry, and we'll do the detailing then.